Okay, good morning. Happy day after 4th of July. And we're going to finish up this little bird. Sweet little thing. Now I noticed that in the original that the orange was a little too orange, so we're going to tone some of that down. And we're going to do some of the background color again too. We're going to basically go over the whole thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is probably throw in some of that background color again. And trying to remember what that color was. Yeah, we'll add a little bit of lighter white to it, which is basically white with a little bit of, titanium white with a little bit of unbleached titanium. We're just going to knock that in a little bit. Just so that the paint isn't so thin. I'm going to go a little more careful right up to the branches. Now remember, last time we talked about making those branches possibly more of a yellow ochre than gray. We're going to see how that works. Maybe a light yellow ochre. Sorry, my chair's squeaky. Just to give this a little more depth. And to help pop him a little bit more too. You know, I was thinking this morning while I was having my coffee that I'd seen other videos too, of how to paint. And what I noticed is they'll take, well, I look at the advanced videos more than the beginners, but I do notice that what they often do is they'll pick one scene and they'll show you how to paint that scene. And they'll charge you, over $100 to do that one scene. Which to me means nothing. Because painting isn't about learning how to paint one scene. It's about learning how to paint. And I've been teaching painting for over 30 years. Acorn itself has been in business for 25, but when I was in Europe, I did teach one child for a couple of years. So I'd say probably about 30 years. I've been a teacher for even longer. I started teaching my first class when I was 17 when I was in college. When I was in high school, I was also in college, and I was in a program that teaches early childhood education, and that started when I was 17. So I've been in a classroom setting for a long, long time. And the one thing that I have learned, especially through Acorn, is that you don't learn everything in one sitting. You just don't, no matter what the subject. And it made me realize that what you really need is time and practice. And at Acorn, I've noticed with adults, it takes a good 3 months of 3 different paintings at least, sometimes 4, to really understand what it's about, because you have to learn about the materials. Certain pigments are different strengths, and so what is a lot for one pigment in the same amount of strength is a tiny bit for another. For instance, cerulean blue. At the studio, we call that blue Hercules, because that blue is so strong that you add it to anything, it's going to take over. And it's only through trial and error that you realize this. A lot of times first-time painters will make huge globs of paint trying to get the color, and that is very normal, very natural, very normal. And you'll find that after a while you don't need that much paint and you understand the pigment strengths, and that can't happen from me telling you something. That has to happen from you experimenting. So the point I'm trying to get is, with these videos, if you're doing them for about 3 months, I want you to look at your first painting and then look at your last painting and see how much you've learned. Not to mention that it's not going to cost you $100 to learn from one painting, you know? Okay, so what I did here was, it's very different from the photograph. Now, the one thing you may have learned from taking my classes with me is that I have never, ever, ever been a slave to a photograph. Because quite honestly, in my head, I see it better. Now, maybe it's my synesthesia, I don't know. But I encourage you to look beyond the photograph. And I felt that if I put a gray here, it's going to feel like too much gray, and then bam, this, you know, orange color. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to come up with a type of yellow ochre that's grayed down. So what I did was I had lightened this a few minutes ago. It's the same color, just a little bit lighter, and that color is making a gray with blue, brown, and white, and in the second layer adding a little bit more white. It also leans more towards the brown than the blue. This here is yellow ochre, white, and a little bit of that color to gray it down. So I'm just going to knock those in. Now, the thing about doing tree branches, which is really kind of fun actually, and it helps with my shaky hands a lot, is if you hold the brush like this and you roll it, you will get more of a twig looking effect than if you try to stay in the lines and do it straight. So don't worry about the lines. Go outside the lines. Be a rebel. You can roll it completely, or you can just rock back and forth. I need more of that color. This is one of those beautiful unnameable colors. Jack and I often look for unnameable colors. And what I mean by unnameable colors is that it's a type of gray, but you can't say for sure where it leans. You know, is it a gray that's blue? Is it a gray that's green? And usually an unnameable color is all of the above. Okay, let's see, that one's kind of in darkness. This one has a little bit of light right here. And we might even add even more light on the final go around, you know, before we stop today. Remember, temperature and it's such a beautiful color. Temperature and value are what pushes one object to the next. Now our subject is this little bird, right? So all these things are supporting this bird. So in other words, you're making decisions, color and value-wise, to help him pop a little bit. Now, you still want it to be part of the design. These are very important elements to this painting because it breaks up this design. Look at this wonderful abstractions you have here. Those are actually the abstractions are probably the first thing I look for in a painting when I'm deciding what I'm going to paint. And these abstractions are beautiful. Charlie did a great job. He captures things so beautifully, especially wildlife. Okay, so now, oops, I forgot that tone. Well, no, actually, that's kind of a dark. So, let's make a slightly darker. I don't want it to be too black to interfere with this, so let's see if we lighten it, or we brown it down a little bit more, okay? So what I did was, I took my black, I added more brown, okay? So you have a dark brown. If you really wanted to go crazy with these branches, you could add in, you know, a bunch of different details and stuff. But I like to not confuse things too much and keep it somewhat simple. Oops. Shaky hands again. How many of you were up all night because of all the sounds of the fireworks? Oh my goodness. I was so amazed that I didn't hear about any fires the next day caused by the fireworks. Okay, now let's throw a little bit of a lighter value in there. You're just going to take a lighter, warm gray. You want to keep it warm because the light is warm. Let's see if this is light enough. Not light enough. Okay, so why don't we try some unbleached titanium? That is actually a warm gray. In reality, there we go. Just here and there. This, of course, is I think the trunk of the tree, actually. I'm going to lighten up that a little bit. Okay, now let's go to the these weird yellow things in the background. These are out of focus leaves. There's a couple of interesting little weird branches too. Now I'm not going to completely get rid of this. This is a support to add to this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften them just a little bit more, so they don't just look like spots. And then I'm going to put in a really light, and because I put this white in here, it'll support it, a really light, distant kind of branches. Now you don't want to do spots. I just ran and did this because it felt like, excuse me, it felt like a spot to me. There's this thing that this term that Jack and I often use called spotty. It's getting spotty. Spotty means that you're not feeling the whole form. It's really more, you're feeling it here and there, and you literally end up with what looks like spots. Yeah, we don't want that. Okay, now to do these branches here, I'm going to use a very light gray, and I'm going to thin it out quite a bit, and I'm just going to line it up a little, okay? So take your lightest gray that you have, add a lot of mineral spirits or terpenoid. Now you got to kind of do this in one motion. It's easy to hold your breath when you do it because when you breathe your arm moves. So let's try it. Notice how loose I held that brush. You can also do it this way, but as you're going, that twirl that I told you about before, you want to do that effect. So now I'm going to hold it this way and show you. Interesting fun fact. Branches on a tree, they've discovered, mathematically can be worked out to perfect fractals. That Mother Nature, she's something, huh? Another interesting fact, fun fact, talking about fractals, is that Jackson Pollock's paintings can too. What? What's up with that? Because that was just random. So how does that happen? So much more to this universe than we know. Okay, so that's enough for that. And now we're going to make the leaves pop a little bit. So the leaves don't pop as much as the color of the bird, but they do pop a lot more than this background. So I've made 2 values of green from the last time, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a lighter green in here and a light, I think a lighter, maybe a dark, I don't know, I'll have to check. Maybe a lighter green in here too. Yeah, probably lighter. So let's see, I haven't tested them yet, which is why I'm saying probably. Let's start off first with this one. Now, is it the green that's in the picture? No, but who cares? You know, it's your green. You get it as best you can to a place where you like it, and then it's fine. If you like it, as far as color goes, if you like it, that's okay. Value is a different story. You kind of really have to keep the values correct. Color is all your own. And understanding how to make color is really understanding painting, not how to make the right color. I see more people get frustrated and quit because they feel they can't mix the colors. The colors, everything that you've learned, you know, in kindergarten for mixing colors is correct. And then it's, you know, my job to teach you color theory, and then your job to decide which one you like, what pleases you, because everybody has their own palette. That's something that's really important to understand, is you can go to like 5 different art shows, let's say all landscape. Whether they're the same landscape or not, what you will see on the wall is a consistency of color. So if you squint your eyes, the whole thing feels like it goes together, no matter what the landscapes are. And that's because every individual person has their own palette in their head. Now, certainly some schools of thought, you know, like the Hudson Valley School and so forth, have similar colors. But the reason why different artists will have similar colors is because they're working together and influencing each other. If you're doing this at home, you don't have that benefit of seeing how other people view the same thing that you do. But that's okay. I just want you to find your own color. I can give you an idea. There's one reason why I don't go crazy about get exactly this color and get exactly that color, because I don't want to make another version of me. I want you to find the version of you. And I see in a lot of classes I've taken. I took a class at a local North Shore college years ago when I was a kid. It was a night class because I was working. I was probably about 17. And the teacher there said, how do you put it? This color here, he said, this isn't the color combination you're supposed to use. And he said I used the wrong blue. Now, maybe it was because of temperature. I can't honestly remember. But the one thing that I did notice, and we were painting a figure, by the way. There was a model there. The one thing that I did notice was everybody's palette was exactly the same. And that bothered me to the point that I never forgot it. And here's another fun fact. I always tell the kids this because it's, number one, because it's true, and number two, because, you know, people often think that, you know, I was born with this, you know, God-given talent. And it's not about that. It's about dedication and practice. But that same teacher, told me in a critique, mind you, where he lined them all up from best to worst, mine being on the worst, and this was a portrait class, and he said, I think you need to become a nurse. I was like, oh my God. And he said, the only way you're ever going to make a living at art is if you paint Elvis on velvet. That was his exact words to me. And then if that wasn't bad enough, actually that was the turning point that brought me to my husband Jack, who taught me how to paint. But and right from the beginning I had success with him because he taught me the way that I'm teaching you. I can't help but laugh when I think about it. But anyways, if that's not bad enough, I mean, I was like really upset when I left there. I went to, you know, I kept going to class and so forth. And my mother got sick right towards the end of that class. There was a snowstorm, I remember that. The last day of class, we weren't going to have finals. He even told us we weren't going to have finals. There was like 2 feet of snow on the ground. The class wasn't canceled. And my mother had just, like an hour before the class, had just had a mastectomy. So I didn't go to the class. I sat with my mother. And he completely flunked me for the whole class, for the whole year, because I didn't go that day. Even though I called the school and told them that my mother just got out of surgery and I really feel, especially with the snowstorm, that it's better for me if I stay with her. And yet he still flunked me. And the teacher of that school, he was the founder of the school, so there was no recourse I could have. And that's what brought me to Jack. I just added some lighter yellow. The yellow that we had here, I just put a little bit in there just to kind of pop it a little bit more. Now, if you want to go really crazy on those leaves, there's also some darks in the veins. Now, yeah, I don't want you to go like too nuts, you know, just suggestions are good. So don't use a black, use a darker green that has a little more blue in it. These greens have more yellow. This one has more blue. And just kind of give a suggestion. Usually where leaves get right to where the stem is, they're a little bit darker. I don't even know what's going on with this leaf. I think I just made it up. Okay, so we're going to leave those like that. And we're going to work on this bird. Now, like I said at the beginning, this felt a little too red. It's a little more yellower than that. So I took some cadmium yellow deep, which is kind of really an orange yellow, but you can just make an orange yellow by red and yellow with more yellow than red. This is where the fun part begins. So he's got these, like, you know, little feathery stuff, which you can't really see in the photograph because his feathers are so together. But because we know that they're feathers, I want you to just kind of keep that in your back of your mind as you're painting, you know, that he has these little feathers. Now, you're not going to completely cover all this orange because it's the support. So we're just going to add a little bit into there. Isn't he beautiful? I highly recommend everybody, especially during this quarantine time, to set up a bird feeder next to a window near where you sit. It's probably the most entertaining thing you'll see during this quarantine. My cats, we call it a kitty TV because my cats like to sit I have a French door that leads out to the garden, and I have a trellis with wisteria, and on the trellis is also a bird feeder, so it's right there. And my cats sit at the French doors looking out at that bird feeder, I swear, all day long, especially Penny. And it's interesting because over the course of this quarantine, as Penny's sitting there, there's been like other cats. Penny's an indoor cat, and there's been other cats in the neighborhood that come by and visit her, and it's quite hysterical, actually. Things I'd never noticed because my life had always been so busy. And I have to say that's one benefit of this quarantine is it slows us all down. It lets us see what's going on around us. So I took a yellow orange for here, and then I added a tiny bit more red, and I have this deep red underneath. And what's happening is, by scumbling it just a little bit, scumbling is when you take a light and you drag it over a dark, the dark shows through and it creates that feathery feel. Now it does get even darker there, so I'm going to add a little more red for that part. But once again, not as dark as what I have underneath. Do you remember during the last video for this, I said we're going to make everything slightly darker than it actually is, and then when we go back, we're going to lighten it up. The only probably thing that is going to be a little more consistent of not doing that is this black. I do have to fix some edges and stuff, and do have to add a little bit detail in here. The photograph shows no detail here, but I think we're going to add a little bit there. This under here is actually very light. Okay, now before I get into making the black, what I want to do is I want to first of all grab that beak. That beak is such an interesting color. Let's see if this is light enough. Not light enough. It's almost a blue. So the way that I'm going to do this is first I'm going to put in this very light gray blue. Gray blue is made with dark blue, dark brown, more blue than brown, and white. Okay, and then I'm going to take I'm going to use a very light blue to put a highlight in there. And if you have a cobalt blue, that'll be perfect. Not all of you may have that. Actually, that's more like the color that it should be. And then I'll add cobalt with a little bit of white. Okay, now his eyes. In the photograph, his eye is basically a dot, but we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start first with a dark gray. I don't recall this chair being this squeaky before. Must be the change in the temperature outside. Put in a little bit of a light. Be something a little bit more. Okay, we're going to leave that for the moment. Let's work on some of this. That's also kind of a blue to me. Now in the photograph, it's not going to read as a blue, it reads as a gray. But watch what happens when you add a really pretty blue. Isn't that so much more interesting than a photograph? That's the difference between painting and photography, and why you should never try and match completely a photographic look. Because photographs are very limited in their ability to capture color because they're a machine. This whole time I've been using a number 4 Master Stroke Red Sable. Even on the little teeny stuff. If you have a good enough brush, if your brush is soft enough and good enough, you can get a fine line from it. Okay, so let's touch up those blacks, because some of the background has kind of like seeped into the foreground. So the first thing I notice is this one here. And then up here. I can thank my shaky hands for that. There's a little redrawing here because it's not quite right. Might not have been right from the beginning, or it could have just been the background, you know, kind of tucked in there. Okay, and I noticed that on his beak there's a dark down here. Of course there's the dark, oh, totally forgot about that. There's the dark inside. Alright, and I'm going to make that a little more rounder. Okay, now, his feet. Bird feet always gross me out. I used to have little finches when I was younger. I used to breed finches. Fascinating to watch. Okay, he's got a lot of stuff going on with that foot. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, and we wanted to put just a little bit of something in there. So we're going to take a dark gray that leans towards blue. And we're just going to add just a tiny bit down like this. Okay, and let's fix this. Oh, you know what? There's those flowers. Should we put those flowers in? I'm kind of thinking not. Just because I think it'll take away from the bird. But what I do want to do is I want to adjust those two branches underneath him because they just kind of look like nubbies. And here it is up close and finished. Cute little bird. See you next time.